King Sikhidhvaja has renounced his kingdom. He's been living as the forest ascetic for many years. He left his kingdom and he abandoned his wife, who was enlightened. So it seems that he abandoned enlightenment to seek enlightenment because he thought that being an ascetic was the way. But his wife thinks that perhaps he's ready for the teachings of self-inquiry now, and she's flown to the forest to be with him, and she's quite disheartened at the state he's in, which is just a typical state of the ascetic. He'll have blackened skin because he's been outdoors all the time. The sun would have darkened him. He's got matted locks, dressed in a coarse garment. All his former beauty is gone. Vasishta continued, afraid that Sikhidhvaja might once again spurn her teaching, considering that she was an ignorant girl. Chudala transformed herself into a young brahmana ascetic and descended right in front of her husband. So even though he was a king previously, well versed in the scriptures, even though he's now been an ascetic for many years, he would be still unable to accept the teachings from his wife, such as the depth of this prejudice. So Chudala, being shrewd, disguises herself as a young priest. Sikhidhvaja saw the young ascetic and was delighted. The two vied with each other in spiritual radiance. The young ascetic was in fact incomparably radiant, so that Sikhidhvaja took him to be a celestial. He worshipped the ascetic appropriately. Chudala appreciatively accepted the worship and remarked, "I have travelled around the world, but never have I been worshipped with such devotion. I admire your tranquility and your austerity. You have chosen to tread the razor's edge, inasmuch as you have abandoned your kingdom and resorted to the forest life." Sikhidhvaja replied, "Surely you know everything, O son of the gods. By your very look you are showering nectar upon me. I have a lovely wife who is just now ruling my kingdom. You resemble her in some ways. And the flowers I have offered you in worship, may they be blessed. One's life attains its fruition by the worship of the guest who arrives unsolicited. The worship of such a guest is superior even to the worship of the gods. Pray, tell me who you are, and to what I owe this blessing of your visit to me." The brahmana, Chudala, said, "There is a holy sage in this universe known as Narada. Once he was engaged in meditation in a cave on the bank of the holy river Ganga. At the end of his meditation he heard the sound of bracelets, apparently belonging to some people engaged in water sports. Out of curiosity he looked in that direction and saw a few of the foremost celestial nymphs sporting in water, naked. They were indescribably beautiful. His heart experienced pleasure, and his mind momentarily lost its equilibrium, overcome by lust." Celestial nymphs are a tricky one. Sikhidhvaja asked, "Holy One, though he was a sage of great learning and a liberated one at that, though he was free from desire and from attachment, and though his consciousness was as limitless as the sky, how was it that he was overcome by lust?" And this is going to be a theme, I think, of this story. It's possible to fall from enlightenment. We have the idea that enlightenment is a once and for all thing, and there's some way of understanding it that way. But enlightenment doesn't mean to say relaxation. Enlightenment is about awareness, which is about supreme vigilance. And it's possible for a notion to arise within enlightenment. And if the sage is not vigilant, the sage will identify with that notion, and the whole of samsara can kick in again. And this is how creation comes about. This is how the whole of creation came about. It's about a moment when the infinite consciousness became aware of a finite aspect of itself, and the whole caboodle kicks in. So if it wasn't possible to fall from enlightenment, then there would be no creation, there'd be no world, no universe. The brahmana Chudala said, O royal sage, all beings in the three worlds, including the gods in heaven, have a body that is subject to the dual forces. Whether one is ignorant or one is wise, as long as one is embodied, the body is subject to happiness and unhappiness, pleasure and pain. By enjoying satisfying objects, one experiences pleasure, and by deprivation, hunger, etc., one experiences pain. Such is nature. So, there's always going to be happiness and unhappiness, pleasure and pain. The secret, I suspect, the secret is really the extent to which consciousness is lost in happiness, unhappiness, pleasure or pain. Consciousness naturally identifies with such experiencing. The brahmana Chudala continued, if the self, which is the reality and which is pure, is forgotten even for a moment, the object of experience attains expansion. If there is unbroken awareness, this does not happen. Even as darkness and light have come to be firmly associated with night and day, the experience of pleasure and pain has confirmed the existence of the body in the case of the ignorant. In the wise, however, even as such an experience is reflected in consciousness, it does not produce an impression. As in the case of crystal, the wise man is influenced only by the object when it is actually and physically present nearby. But the ignorant person is so heavily influenced that he broods on the object even in its absence. Such are their characteristics. Thinned out vulnerability is liberation, whereas dense colouring of the mind is bondage. This is an extremely important passage. It's all about being here in the now, in the present. Through education, through science, through consensus reality, we've come to substitute notions of reality for our own experience. This is a problem that the church and religion have with science. Science gives us a story which is quite contrary to our experience. The earth seems flat. It looks like the sun rises and goes around the earth and then sets. But science tells us no, it's the opposite. It's the earth that goes round the sun. The earth isn't flat, it's round. And so on. And we shouldn't really dispute these facts, but we should also not dispute our own experiencing. It's not that one is right and the other is wrong. There are different modes of relating to our environment. The scientific mode is clearly a highly beneficial one. But we should be careful about conceptualizing our experiencing, because as soon as we conceptualize our experiencing, then we're in the scientific realm, and we should listen to the scientific attitude. We should approach things with a scientific attitude. But as long as we're not conceptualizing, then we stay with our immediate experiencing, with the immediate experiencing. And the point here is that the wise man is influenced only by the object which is actually and physically present nearby, not by notions of the object, not by notions.